Hey y'all, let's have a conversation. This is Life Conversations with Dr. Amy podcast, and it is June. This is Father's Day month. We're going to be talking about fatherlessness. I have my guest, Mr. Philip Blackett. Yes, Mr. Philip Blackett. He is an author, consultant, and entrepreneur. He previously worked with FedEx, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Chick-fil-A. He has his master's in divinity degree. He also has his bachelor's in uh, business. He his purpose is to grow God's people, grow God's business, and grow God's kingdom. Welcome, Mr. Blackett.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amy. Happy to be on here with you.
Thank you for coming. And can you tell us a little bit more about your purpose?
Yeah, so I think for me, growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, single parent household with my sister, with the aid of my mom, my grandparents, and my aunt, education was definitely very important for us growing up. I think after I gone through college, business school, and seminary, really got a good sense as far as like what's really most important to me, and that I feel like is really fulfilling the mission I believe God has me on, which is really to grow God's people, His businesses, and His kingdom here on earth for the time I have here. Whether doing that through my career, doing that as far as raising my twin daughters with my wife and being able to have a positive influence on those who I talk to on a day-to-day basis.
That's good. So it is Father's Day month. We're going to get in a little bit about fatherlessness. Um, on a podcast episode I did last year, everybody knows that Dr. Amy grew up in a fatherless home. My mom, she raised me. She was a single Black mother, strong Black woman. But we need to stop this generational curse, and especially in our culture of these fatherless homes.
Mhm.
So can we speak about the effects of living in a fatherless home?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you and I both share a somewhat shared experience of growing without an active and present father.
Mhm.
And, I can at least speak for myself and my own experience that, quite honestly, that's something that I wish had not happened. I definitely am thankful for my mother, who was very strong willed and wanted the best for myself and my sister, and also the help we got from our grandparents and some extended family. I
Mhm.
also feel like, you know, she had to take on some things that, quite frankly, she didn't need to do. Right. I think that there's a joy of being a mother, and there's a lot already on your plate as a mother to raise your kids from that vantage point. I don't believe that God intended for a mother to be both mother and father. So to ask her to take on other things and to teach your son and your daughter certain things that a father should step in to do, especially for me growing up as a young man, learning what it means to be a man. There's certain conversations she probably isn't too comfortable or confident having.
Exactly.
Um, and so now I think about it too. Now as a father myself, I have a wife, I have two 7-year olds, daughters, that we're raising together. I think about it almost in full circle. A lot of what I'm doing now as a father is giving my kids a lot of what I didn't have. Being able to have those moments that now I'm realizing when they're 6 or 7 years old, they're starting to remember these things, these
Mhm.
moments where, like, I didn't think I would back then, but something as simple as, playing tag before bath time,
Mhm.
or brushing their teeth, and they're asking questions about what they learned in school. Like, I don't remember those moments primarily because I didn't have those moments with my father. And I think it's really unfortunate for me, but instead of me dwelling on that, I think it's an opportunity for at least try to break that generational curse, as you said before, and provide something for my kids that I didn't have, that quite honestly, I feel like I wish all families wouldn't have to go through as far as like not having fathers in the home. Not now, granted, there are definitely two-parent households out there for sure, and I'm thankful for them. But for those who grew up in single-parent households, it's my wish that that's not necessarily the case because I don't believe that that's what God intended to happen in the first place when He designed us.
Exactly. And I am a mother of three, and I was a single mother myself. So not only did I grow up in a fatherless home, my kids grew up in a fatherless home.
Hmm.
So again, that generational curse, which I did never desired, and I like that you said, and I have that same mindset. God didn't intend for us to raise the children as single mothers. Um, and I like that you think about, you when you said moving forward. I recently was in therapy. I started therapy last year. And some of the things that my therapist talked about were things that were from me not having a father in my life. Some of the mental issues that I deal with and battling right now is, and also relationship issues, is from not having my father in my life. So when you talk about fatherlessness, do you ever, like in your church or in a community, do you have those conversations with other men or boys?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think, it's one of those things that it really brings a lot of perspective, Dr. Damie, where you're thinking about something that might have happened years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You oftentimes don't fully run away from, you don't fully gain closure from. And even when you're sharing about your experience with therapy, the thought is like, if you're meeting somebody and they say, "Tell me about your life story," and you're reliving some things that were both good and bad, that could be a tough thing. And I definitely recognize for me that definitely was something where I was definitely looking for guidance from other brothers, even though they weren't like in my family to connect with. I think what happens is like without a father, you have a void. You
Mm-hmm.
have a sense of trying to figure out this hole that you're trying to fill that really can only be filled, at least from a physical standpoint, from your father because you're gaining some sort of identity from him. The analogy I often talk to people about when it comes to the topic of fatherlessness and why this is such a huge issue is, you know, imagine if we lived in a world without our heavenly father.
Yeah.
How would we go about recognizing who we are? How do we relate with one another? How do we raise the next generation? Like there's an origin story that is missing, that is disconnected, and you're trying your best to piecemeal it together by who you associate with as far as other groups of people, right? For
Mm-hmm.
me, it might be like trying to find other, other men, young men that may either have fathers and they're like pseudo father figures to me, or those that we're basically commiserating our lack of fathers in our home experiences together, almost like a trauma bond, they'll say.
Yeah.
And, I think this is basically you're trying the best you can to piece together something that's missing and then getting frustrated that even your best efforts, at least for me, couldn't fully cover the hole that was there. And if anything else for me, as I got older, I recognized that that part that my earthly father could really step in, that's now gone. That like, it can't be filled. So for me, the best way to fill that is a greater, deeper relationship with my heavenly father,
Mm-hmm.
to step in there. Because even if my mother or father may forsake me, God is still there with me. And so, really taking hold of that truth and being able to wrap my life around that and say, hey, I can't change what happened in the past, but I can at least start today with providing a better future, not just for myself, but also for the next generation when it comes to my kids. And hopefully for other people that are experiencing fatherlessness and the side effects and the aftermath of not having that in their lives as well.
Now, did you know your father?
Yes, I do. He still lives. I know where he lives. In that sort. Yeah,
Do y'all communicate? Do you have, because, sometimes your father is not there when you're younger, and then you see some people when they grow up, they have that relationship. Do y'all have a relationship at all?
not really. I think we've kind of had kind of a light switch relationship, I would say, like kind of an on or off. Sometimes you'll have some communication and something happens and it turns off for a few weeks, a few months, a few years. It just wasn't that sort of stable relationship I was seeking. And I think after a while, when you've been burned before, or you've gone through heartbreak, or disappointment or frustration, after a certain point, Dr. Amy, you reach a certain point, at least for me, that you start to say, okay, is this worth trying to pursue any further? Or is it better off to say, hey, look, I'm approaching 40 myself. I have kids, I have a wife, I have my own family. Is it probably best to say, hey, listen, I've tried that. If God puts in a moment where we can reconnect, where it's not something we're trying to force, that's fine. However, I'm perfectly content to say, hey, look, he's going to live his life the way he wants to live it. And I'm just going to go ahead and live mine. And it's probably better that way, at least for now.
Yeah, when I talk to my therapist, I would often ask the question, why? Like, why did they leave me? Why did my father leave me? Why wasn't he in my life? And she would tell me a lot of times when I was in my sessions, stop worrying about the why. You have to stop worrying about the why and move forward. But it's so hard for me to stop worrying about the why. I often wonder, because my father is dead and gone now. He's
Mm-hmm.
been dead for about 10 years now.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry to hear that.
And that's okay. And I didn't really have that much emotions because he wasn't really in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I remember bits and pieces when I was a young girl, him in and out of the home. Um, and I knew where he lived, but we didn't have that father-daughter relationship. And I always longed for that. And I think my sister longed for it more. But I always still think back, like, what if? What if he was in my life? Would things be different? Would I be married now?
Mm-hmm.
I've never been married. I'm 49. I've never really had a healthy relationship
Mm-hmm.
with the man. And I just contribute that of not having a father in my life. But it's just so hard to not get over the why. Like, how did he feel? Like, what was his mindset? I just want to ask, I wish I could have asked him that when he was living. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why didn't you want to be in our lives? Why didn't you raise us? Why didn't you help my mom?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever went through that period where you just wanted to ask your father, why didn't you step up and raise me?
Of course. There's no other way to put it, Dr. Amy, but of course, I definitely remember many times growing up, like in high school, having tough conversations with my mom, like getting back at home from a basketball game. My dad wasn't there. My grandfather, he's supposed to be retired. He's taking time out of his retirement to spend time with me and be at my games and that sort. Um, and me breaking down in the car before we get in the house to my mom, just saying, essentially like if you've ever seen Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, that landmark moment when Will Smith's character was like, "Why doesn't my father want me?"
Yeah.
You know, I can't watch that episode without getting teary eyed because that hit home. That hits home. To think about, that is your child, that is your responsibility, that is your image in reality. Let me make sure my baby's okay. And it's hard to stomach how anyone could be content with just not being around.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's really hard, especially when you can't ask that person. because he's no longer there. I think it's also tough because I've had those attempts to have that conversation. And at the time I was much younger, but I was very angry,
Yeah.
very frustrated. And sometimes the answers I got just were not good enough
Hmm.
because what came off to me was just like, you know what? Like, I hear you, but all I'm hearing is just excuses. If that's something that, you know, I think it's just it takes on a whole new level for me because it's like I just can't see myself being distant from my kids and
Yeah.
putting them through what I went through. Because like you're saying, it's like I don't want my kids to be growing up later on having those questions. Where was my dad? Why didn't he love me? Why wasn't he spending time with me? Why won't he take me out to the playground on a Saturday afternoon, like I was hoping to, or like the rest of the kids did with their dads? Why
Mm.
do I feel singled out? And so I think that those questions they came up back then. They still come up now. Um, and yeah, it's a really tough experience that, like I said, I really wish no child would have to experience, even as you're older. That's still like you're still that father's child, and you're still a child, insofar as like your daughter or the son and that sort. And that's just a set of questions I wish no one would have to experience, honestly, because those are very hurtful questions that any child has to experience.
Do you have any like male friends that are not present in their child's life? Have you, do you have any of those in your life? Male
Uh,
friends that you try to encourage to be in their children's life? Have you ever encountered that?
so I guess that comes up with a definition of like where I see a friend versus acquaintances. Because if it was friends, I think if I was aware of that being the case, um, I would be much more active and outspoken into prying myself in that person's business to say, hey, listen,
Yeah.
um, what's going on here? And maybe even sharing my own personal experience to say, hey, listen, you might not think much of this, but think about what's probably happening right now in your child's life by your absence.
Mhm.
And you have something to say about it. You have something you can do about it because you're still living. And your child would definitely appreciate at least an imperfect attempt to be in their lives versus a perfect attempt to be absent. But as far as friends, no, I don't have any friends that have a active absence in their child's lives.
And that was a good message, what you just said, for those that are listening and they're not present in their child's life. So take that point from what Mr. Blackett just said. It's very important to be in present in your child's life because it can have later effects with that child later in life. I know Mr. Blackett is a successful man. I'm a successful woman, and we both grew up in fatherless homes, but we want to stop this generational curse, especially in our Black culture.
Yeah, especially because I think, growing up for me, it just seemed like it started to become more of the rule rather than the exception. And even if I'm a student of history, and even when I studied, African American history, like pre-civil rights movement, what I saw, even just from my own study and research, was you had a much greater number of two-parent households in the Black community in America. And for some reason, you know, post civil rights movement, it took a turn for the worse. You had far fewer fathers and far more single mothers with kids to raise on their own. And it one tells me that it is possible for us to have more two-parent households, more fathers in the family, because we've had that. The
Mm-hmm.
question now is not so much, we can explore why that's not the case anymore, but knowing that it's possible is now the case of how can we make, the sense of it no longer being a stereotype that Black brothers and sisters are growing up in single parent households, rather than having fathers in the household.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were saying that, with you being a man and I'm a woman, so we have different points of view as far as, how it affected us.
Mhm.
It seemed like when you speak, it seemed like you had, even though you might not have, seemed like you didn't struggle too much with moving forward. And it seems like I'm still having struggles.
Well, and
I'm
what I would
still
say,
thinking about it. Like I still to this day, and I tell my mom, I'm like, why? And my sister, like, why do I keep thinking about not having my father in my life? I'm 49 years old. I make move forward. But the
it's
way you talk is like, hey, I had the conversation. I don't want to have that conversation. You're moving forward. And I like that attitude, but I just wish I had that same mindset.
well, here's what I would say, Dr. Amy. Like, I didn't get to this point in 2 weeks. This wasn't something I woke up one morning and all of a sudden I was cleared of it.
Mm,
This is many years in the making. This is part of, what brought me closer to my faith as a Christian, believing that, hey, like the void that my earthly father has left out there, I'm asking my heavenly father to step in. It's having numerous father figures come in for certain periods of time, temporarily growing up, um, and just really understanding it's like, listen, um, this is something that's almost like a death in the family. When somebody passes, you get better over time, but there's still a void, there's still a hole, there's still some hurt that's there.
mhm,
And especially when there's even a lack of closure from what you're sharing is like, not getting those answers to those questions that you have. And you're asking people that, as helpful as they want to be, they're not your father. They're the question should be targeted to him. And it's almost like he like escaped from being able to answer those questions for you. And it's like that's where you can feel like you're robbed of something to move on. You got to have that closure to move on. Um, and so I definitely can resonate there because it's just like it just I just never would have wanted, and I don't think God would have wanted that to be the case for anybody, whether you just have that lack of closure, or better yet, that lack of presence to be able to sense, okay, this is my father. This is him being a part of my life. This is where I kind of get who I am, how I go about things, how I relate to other people, how I live my life. Even after he passes, like I still have that intact. Um, and like I said, that's hard when that's not the case. But for me, it's definitely something that I've just progressed over time. It's taken a lot of work for sure. And the journey still continues. I don't think I'll ever fully reach at 100%,
mm.
but you just work the best you can each day.
That's good. So your purpose on growing God's people, growing God's businesses, growing God's kingdom, we mentioned that you were entrepreneur. So how do you use your purpose as far as helping other entrepreneurs?
So a couple things come to mind. One, when I think about helping God's businesses, is like wanting to help them grow.
Mhm.
And at the time of us recording this podcast, one of the biggest opportunities for businesses to grow is adopting and utilizing artificial intelligence in their businesses. And so AI is seen as the new technology of this generation's internet, basically.
Yeah.
Like when I was growing up, dial-up internet for me was like a whole new phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like making sure nobody was on the phone while you signed on, that sort of thing. What is a website? And for others, it could have been the actual telephone, previous generations, right? So this is on that type of level when it comes to technology. And, that's something that can be a little daunting for people. We often fear what we don't fully understand. And so for me to be able to help, small business owners and entrepreneurs like myself, but help them be able to understand what is AI, how does it relate to their businesses, how can they include it and implement it in their businesses to help them grow, um, I feel like that's part of my purpose while conjoined with this new technology.
Right. So how do they incorporate when you say AI, it's like different forms of AI. How do these businesses incorporate the AI to help grow their business?
Yeah, so I think the biggest takeaway I usually go about with small business owners in this example is that AI is meant to serve you. It is an opportunity to help you grow, help you to become more productive, more profitable, and closer to the goals and dreams you have for your business. And so I think a good example that I use oftentimes with businesses is thinking about how you go about spreading the word about your business to find people to serve.
Yeah.
Oftentimes people think of businesses now, you got to have a marketing team of like 8 people
Hmm.
to reach out to the masses. You got to have, you know, a ads buyer. You got to have a copywriter. You got to have someone that creates your content, someone to record your podcast, somebody to edit your podcast and your videos, someone to manage it all, and then probably a whole nother list of other responsibilities and jobs that need to be done. And depending on the AI tools you use, you actually can get that same amount of production with less than half of the team. Meaning you could have one person that manages and runs the AI tools and a
Hmm.
virtual assistant, and that could essentially be your marketing department. The person that's the team that gets your podcast done, gets your content out there on social media, that reaches out to people through advertising, email marketing, that sort of thing. So that's a big, area, taking marketing for example, to say, hey, how do we help you become more productive with what you're doing, while also saving costs, and also expanding your reach. And that same sort of example could be applied to sales, operations, finance, every function of business. AI is able to touch now.
Yeah, because definitely AI is what it is today. That's the mainstay of today. So how did you get that concept though, with growing when you growing God's businesses, people, and kingdom? What motivated you to name it that?
So I think I went back to the book of Genesis where it all started, right? So once again, we're on this theme about like fatherlessness.
Yeah.
It's like where you get your origin story. How
Yeah.
does this all come about? Why am I here? These certain questions you tend to ask your father or your parents about, right? So even going back to the Bible, the book of Genesis, seeing that, we were created on earth not only to serve God, but we also had a purpose to work, and had a purpose to grow what we've been given and make the most of it. One of my favorite parables in the Bible is the parable of the talents.
Mm.
You had the master that gave 3 people, 3 servants. One had 1 talent, one had 2 talents, and another one had 5 talents. And they said, hey, work with this, grow it. When I come back, let's see what you did with it. The master comes back. He talks to the 3 people. You might hear it. You might know the story how it ends. The person with 5 talents doubled it to 10. The person at 2 talents doubled it to 4. The person at 1 talent, he dug a hole in the ground and didn't even get interest on the talent. And what did the master say? Take that 1 talent and give it to the one who used it wisely.
Mm-hmm.
So in those two examples, Dr. Amy, what it shared with me was we have a purpose here on earth. And part of our purpose here is to grow, to take what we've been given to grow, and not just sales and profits for a business, but grow as far as like our development, our education, our reach, our purpose. The main word here is grow. And so my thought was is like, how do I help grow God's people in terms of like their own personal and professional development? How do I grow their businesses? Because I believe that we're all not so much owners of businesses, we're actually just stewards of what God owns as far as like our businesses, and then grow God's kingdom as well. Part of the thought here is God created the earth because he wanted his kingdom to spread
Exactly.
and to spread in the midst of in opposition to that spread, right? And so part of that is seeing how I can be a part, a small part, but nevertheless a part to grow all three things. That's why I feel like at this point in my life, it really gives me the most purpose and meaning for the duration of my life left here on earth.
And you giving back. God has blessed you and you're blessing others.
Absolutely.
Blessing. So let's talk about, you're an author also. Let's talk about one of your books. It's the boating season coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that one book, your most popular book of how to handle, what is the title again?
So the title is Disagree Without Disrespect: How to Respectfully Debate with Those Who Think, Believe, and Vote Differently from You.
So give us a little summary of how we can handle those situations. Because, two things that people don't like to talk about is religion and politics.
Mm-hmm.
So if we come on a conversation like that with the politics, how can we handle it?
Absolutely. And the good part about this book, Dr. Amy, is that, absolutely vote is in the subtitle of this book. So it absolutely can apply to politics. Believe is in the subtitle of this book. So it can actually absolutely apply to religion. You also have think too. People have different viewpoints and different perspectives. And so what this book is really about is something that applies to politics, religion, money, or just any source of conflict or source of disagreement upon different opinions. Not so much to say that's wrong, but to encourage diversity of thought, to encourage conversations, encourage debates that are respectful and that you can learn from. And so in this book, I share a simple 5-step framework for readers to be able to do that. And so the first step that comes up, Dr. Amy, is to be able to separate the idea or belief from the identity of the believer. And so what that means is essentially oftentimes we might have an idea or belief that we're so intertwined with that
Mm-hmm.
it becomes who we are. And so that if I were to be against that idea, it can be taken as I'm against you. Or if I criticize or critique that idea or belief, now you may take it personal and think I'm hating on you.
Yeah,
But what is trying to be clear is like I'm trying to talk about the idea or belief and not so much you. Because one of the things I learned from my mom, not my dad, was that it is possible to love somebody and it not be contingent on whether or not you agree with them, which gets into my second step, being able to disagree with the idea or belief and love the believer. So it's a kind of a play on what I learned in the Bible as far as hating the sin and loving the sinner.
exactly.
So now once you set that framework, like this, these are the rules of the engagement. Now we are reestablishing those rules here on how we can engage. Now let's engage. Let's go to step 3. Let's debate on the idea at hand based on its merit. I'm talking facts, logic, reasoning, performance, results, analysis. Let's get to the heart of it so it's very clear that we can see whether something works or not, whether something's good or bad, whether we should be yay or nay on it. That doesn't include name calling. That
Exactly.
doesn't include over drawn out emotional or dramatic responses that can leave you feeling kind of awkward because now I got to reach for a Kleenex to wipe your eyes. And I just said I disagree. And now I look like the boogeyman and I don't know where to engage on this argument or debate going forward. I just want to talk about the issue. I'm not hurting your feelings.
Exactly.
And so once you're able to do that, Dr. Amy, now you get to the fourth step. You have the debate, you have the exchange of thoughts and ideas and perspectives. And we get to a point where we should do what we've learned in sports when we were younger. At the end of the game, win or lose, you have youth sports or people playing sports nowadays. What do people usually do at the end of a game? If it's a team sport, they line up from one side to the other, they come towards the other team, they shake each other's hands and say, good game.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I learned growing up, more so from my mom versus my dad, my mom worked in a courtroom and she had attorneys in the courtroom, one on one side, one on the other, fighting, arguing passionately, aggressively, even to the point of thinking like they're gonna probably kill each other if they keep going at it like this. But the ironic part about it, Dr. Amy, is that after that case concluded,
Mm-hmm.
when they exited the courtroom, they did something I wasn't expecting. They often shook hands. They often congratulate the other person on winning the case or good job. And I've often seen them, those two attorneys opposing one another, eating lunch together
Oh,
or going to their daughter's soccer game on the weekend or vacationing, for the holidays with one's family. But I would have thought you're sleeping with the enemy.
yeah,
Well, how could you possibly talk to somebody like that? Like that's what we would think nowadays. If I'm against something, there's no way I want to be friends with you. Unfriend, unfollow, cancel. You know. But back then, there was a point where you could debate, and afterwards, you can still have good sportsmanship. And
yeah,
that's probably the thing that's probably the most missing thing in our society when it comes to this. And then
exactly.
lastly, it lends us to be able to respect and appreciate the person and keep the dialogue open, keep the door open for future conversation. So I could say, hey, Dr. Amy, I appreciate us sharing this dialogue on this topic. It sounds like we're both still on opposite sides of the spectrum here. However, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I did not know that. I didn't know why that was so important to you. Thank you for enlightening me. Thank you for sharing that. I love to be able to continue this conversation at a later date, maybe over lunch, or maybe we can go to a certain event that talks about the same topic and we can learn a little bit more about each other. Like that door opening oftentimes is a great way to influence someone to say, hey, you don't have to be a jerk to somebody just because you disagree. This is
Exactly.
something that as friends, you can disagree and you can still be friends. Like my thought is if you have to agree on everything to be somebody's friend,
Mm-mm.
how many friends would you have? So we know it's possible. We just got to reintroduce this framework to people to help them understand this is a better way to go about things, especially when you have different views and opinions.
Do you find that harder for women to do?
So, depending on the scenario, I can see it can be because it involves someone being the bigger person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's also one that involves you to look at things more soberly,
Mm-hmm.
where somebody may be quick to say, "Oh, I'm debating with this woman on this issue. I'm expecting her to be more emotional about it." Or if I can get her feeling emotional, then I can sideline the whole debate.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's a woman debating another woman or a woman debating a man, I can see where there's some differences and some nuances to the framework. But I think at the end of the day, too, I've also seen examples where even with my mom, that you can be successful with that, having a similar adoption of that framework, because what it says is this is what I can control within my own being, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can't necessarily control how that person reacts. That person may still yell. That person may still call me out of my name. That person may stomp, just act like a kid with a temper tantrum or just not want to hear me whatsoever. But I can still be the bigger person, which people can see from the onset and say, you know what? Dr. Amy's carrying herself a lot better than this other person. And
Yeah.
so even if they disagree, they can at least respect how you approach it and the maturity you have from it that basically says to them, you know what? hats off to Dr. Amy. That wasn't an easy thing to do, but I can at least respect where she came about it and how she carried herself in the process.
Yeah. I just know us women, we hold grudges. We
Men too.
But
Let's
not as much as us women. Like I'm a witness, I'm guilty, but I just know us women, being a woman, we can hold
Mhm.
some grudges. And to respectfully debate with another woman would be hard for a woman. I know it would, but that's book you can use with other situations as well, other than voting.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
we're talking about politics, religion, your favorite sports team. We could be talking about like, what do you want to eat for dinner tonight?
those are
You
some-
know, people can people can get very passionate about disagreement on just about any topic now. And the
yeah,
challenge is more so how can we navigate those differences respectfully? Because
yeah,
it isn't something new that just happened now. It wasn't like historically 40, 50 years ago, there were no disagreements.
exactly.
It's just a different animal now. I would partly blame social media, right?
Hmm.
It's a lot easier to let people know how you really feel with those Twitter fingers commenting anonymously. So you don't have to have any sort of accountability to this is what I said, this is who I am, and now you know. Um, but I do have hope that I think a lot of people have had enough of this polarization that they want to find a solution that gets them in a better place. And that's what I'm hoping for with this book.
That's good. Because people can be cruel. Deciding and on social media, they make comments that are just cruel and disrespectful. So where can we find this book?
Absolutely. So you can find on Amazon, just look up Disagree Without Disrespect, or you can look up my name, Philip Blackett, Philipblackett. And it's available on Amazon along with my other books.
Okay. Is it on any of your books on Audible?
Not yet. I haven't gotten to the point of being able to record them, but that's hopefully in the plan in the short term.
Okay. Good. So we discuss fatherlessness, growing God's kingdom and people and businesses, and we discussed your book. What are some lasting words from all the conversations we had that we you can tell us to the listeners and to those that are viewing this episode? What are some encouraging words from Mr. Blackett?
Sure. That's a big question right there. No pressure there. Here's what I would say, Dr. Amy. I think that you and I have lived quite a long life up to this point. And I think for us and our readers, one of the things I've learned is if you live long enough, you're going to go through some ups and downs, some things that pan out the way exactly you wanted it to, and
Hmm.
things that you weren't expecting at all. And you may still be recovering from it. And what I would say, something that's been helpful for me through those ups and downs that I still experience every day is realizing one, we've been blessed with another day, another opportunity to live. Not everyone's gotten the chance to live today compared to yesterday. So that's enough for me to at least count my blessings there. And then two, trusting, at least for me, three words that my wife gave me when she prayed over me during my toughest time in life where I was contemplating giving up on life. She
Yeah.
prayed over me three words and said, God will provide.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say would be my lasting words, just those same three words my wife gave to me. In the midst of everything that you might be going through right now, I'm trusting God that God will provide.
Yes, he will. Wow, those are some good lasting words. I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for all you've said, all your recommendations, handling disrespect. He's growing God's kingdom and people and businesses. So, how can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Definitely you can go to my website, philipblackett.com. You can look up my books on Amazon, and feel free to connect with me on social media. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all those places as well. Love to contact people, connect with them, and continue the conversation.
Yes. And I will leave his contact information and the details of this episode. And y'all hit him up, y'all. He's growing God's kingdom and God's businesses and God's people in God's kingdom. All right. Well, thank you for this conversation, Mr. Blackett.
Thank you
And
so much for the opportunity, Dr. Amy.
you have a good rest of your day.
You as well. God bless you.
You too.